Hello and welcome back to the Motorsport Baithak podcast. I'm your host Didi, and joining me today once again is my friend and your co-host Vedant. On this episode, we'll be reviewing the Belgian GP weekend. So let's grab some chai, take our seats, ready our opinions, and dive right into the conversation. Hello Vedant. I think this was the most tiring race that I have ever seen in F1 so far. I was tired at 1 p.m. in the afternoon when they finally called off the race, and I took a nap after that.
Absolutely. It was a marathon, which was eventually the smallest race in Formula One ever. So, yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely, I think on Saturday after the qualifying, I tweeted from our Motorsport Baithak handle that couldn't have asked for a better return to racing after the summer break, and I think we'd be more upset that if I think we'd be more upset if F1 moved Spa away into a different place in the calendar and not right after the return from summer break, and then we get an absolutely horrendous Sunday, and we were home. Imagine the fans who were out there for over 4 hours in that rain. Not fun for them. But even though we didn't get a race, it seems that we have a lot to talk about. So let's dive right into it. Now, obviously, I think the biggest story from Saturday was the fact that Landon Norris had P1 pace, but he crashed out as he, I guess, tried to do a flying lap in Q3. It was just Lando and Seb out in the wet, and we heard both of them saying that the conditions were not good enough for qualifying. But I think a lot of heat was. A lot of fans were, angry and upset, and a lot of drivers were upset with how the FIA handled it. So basically, how Michael Massey handled it. But then we also saw Martin Brundle come up and come on the commentary and say that it wasn't really just Michael Massey's fault. The drivers could have also chosen to do otherwise, for which he got a lot of heat from the fans, especially on Twitter, which he referred to later on. But in your opinion, Vedant, what went wrong on Saturday, and is Michael Massey and his team solely responsible for the events of Saturday? And when I say that, I mean Lando's crash.
Yeah, I think, see, Formula One, obviously, we know that we have to prioritize safety, driver safety first. And after what we saw in W Series, at those six cars crashing out at Rouge and Radio Complex, I think it was absolutely unnecessary to let those cars out in for Q3. Obviously, the situation was different, and nobody knew like how worse it was uh, at the time of Q3 starting. But since it was raining so heavily, I think they could have waited another 10 20 minutes. But then again, you can't say, because the rain might have gotten heavier and heavier still, and that would have rained out the entire Saturday. So it was the wrong decision. But yeah, I don't know what else could have been done.
I mean, yeah, there is definitely a question to ask there, in my opinion. Sebastian Vettel came onto the radio time and again during his, outlap, and he said that, why isn't this being red flagged? You should red flag it immediately and whatever. And he was pretty adamant about it during the first, 3.5 minutes or 4 minutes, whatever he took on his outlap. So it does beg the question that what was happening, and why Michael Massey, did he not get the message? Did he not see how the drivers were giving feedback? Were all the other conditions, because there are requirements that need to be fulfilled in order for the session to go ahead, right? Like there needs to be an X amount of visibility. I think like one of the requirements is that the adjacent marshal's posts and the lights on the track should be visible, and things like that. So were those conditions okay, and it was just the drivability that was not there on the track? But yeah, I guess it begs the question that what exactly happened in those moments that Michael Massey did not call off the session sooner, especially after the drivers were on the radio with their teams, and what if the teams contacted Michael Massey to red flag the session immediately or not, and because we don't know the entire dynamics of what went off behind the scenes.
Yeah.
So maybe a comment or two about that from Michael Massey over the course of this week will be interesting to see. But I do agree with I think Martin Brundle and I think Paul di Resta came to his rescue after that in the commentary box, and he also pointed out the fact that um, it isn't just in Michael Massey's hand to red flag a session, and that is when the drivers won't go. Obviously, if you let the drivers on the track, their aim is to do the best they can. But again, the decisions don't only lie with the drivers and Michael Massey to whether go ahead with the session or not. The drivers can think for themselves, and there's a whole team with every driver that can think about the conditions and their driver's safety and their cars, the car's condition and whatnot. So, I guess um, what I'm trying to say is the teams and the drivers also need to take more responsibility regarding their safety, and obviously the loop needs to be better and better than ever between the drivers, teams, and the FIA regarding all safety.
Yeah,
So yeah,
absolutely.
I wouldn't.
I mean, like in the last big controversial Formula One race, if we think about it, USA 2005, the race did go ahead, and all the teams with, I think it was Michelin tires, pulled out, right, and they came into the pits. So it was the team's call at the end of the day to pull out of that race. So yeah, as you said, the teams should
Exactly.
take more responsibility.
Yeah, and then we also had Martin Brundle and other commentators talk about how people used to go racing back in the day. Back in the day in much worse conditions, in cars that were less technically sound per se, or like less safer. But I think that is not the conversation. Obviously, times have changed, and I think as fans also we need to understand that if these guys are going racing, like what do we expect out of racing? What are the safety standards we are looking for? What are raceable conditions? What are dangerous conditions? And honestly, sitting at home, we're not the best judge of them, and it just depends on what the drivers are saying, and we should take their point of view as our reference in these situations per se. But talking about safety, I think the second most, I think the largest conversation piece that we have is what needs to be done with the Eau Rouge Radion complex. Now, this is a story that has been developing since I think the 24 hours of Spa for the European Endurance Championship, the European GT Championship,
Yeah,
and it has only built up ever since then, coming into this weekend. Now, obviously, for those who don't know, there are changes coming to that particular complex, amongst other changes all around the track, because bike racing, motorcycle racing is returning to Spa next year. So they're having to meet FIM standards, which is the governing body for all motorbike racing. So there are changes coming to that particular corner, but obviously uh, what else do we need in that particular complex? Because it seems that is the one thing that we're not able to solve for at least any sort of car racing.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, uh, sorry, the 24 hours of Spa incident, and then the W Series incident, and then Landon Norris's incident. So Norris incident, and obviously we had the 2019 Formula 2 accident, right? There was an article on the race.com which said the issue is not with the corner itself, but it is with the walls and the runoff area. And I think
Yeah,
all the other drivers have that same sentiment, because Louis De Letras and Callum Ilott and everyone tweeted numerous times during all these events that the runoff areas and the walls, there needs to be more space, because every time we saw the cars just bounce off the walls, bounce off the tire barriers, and come back on the racing line and come back on the track, which obviously means other cars will hit them. So obviously, see, Rouge Radion is one of the most iconic corners complexes in motorsport, not just in Formula One, in motorsport. So we can't just change it overnight and like that only. So the obviously the first step with other precautions as such as the runoff area and all that would be a great help.
yeah. I mean, that is what everyone has been saying, and I think Lewis Hamilton also in his post qualifying, in his post qualifying interview said that they should leave the corner alone and there's no need to change it. But I guess he also, I don't remember, but he definitely would agree, that the runoff area and the way the corner complex is and the racetrack is around that area needs to be changed. And like I mentioned before, there are changes coming to that. And you mentioned out the exact you mentioned the exact problem with the corner, which is the fact that the cars hit the wall and bounce back onto the racetrack, which creates a really dangerous situation. Now we also have to understand that F1 or FIM or FIA are not paying for the changes made to the track. It is the track's owners, the organizers at the track who are making those changes so that they can get racing at the track, so that they can at the end of the day it's a business. F1 is not concerned with or FIA is not concerned with the amenities at the track or how safe the track is. You build the track and the FIA will grade it. So I guess and I guess Michael Massey has said that according to the FIA, the track is still safe. So that is maybe something that FIA want to revisit, and maybe it might not be a grade A track anymore for F1 racing or any of the top tier racing. So maybe that's a conversation for Michael Massey and the rest of the FIA that grades this track. But we also need to understand that since all these series are going there, and this thing is happening not just in F1 but in different series. Is it just the circuit promoter, like the circuit owner, that needs to change? Because I think the commentators have told us, Martin Brundle pointed out and Crofty pointed out that it will be a huge project to undertake if we were to expand the area around the Oroge Radio complex, because it is already very narrow and there's a steep banking on one side of the complex, while on the other hand it's sort of a similar situation, I think. But yeah, so obviously it's a multi-million-dollar project, but who's going to pay for it when we already have these changes coming in for 2022? Do we wait and see how these changes affect all racing, including GT racing, Formula 1, W Series, or whoever's going to race at Spa? Or do we preempt any further safety issues by injecting money? So does that money need to be raised by F1 and other racing series organizers and promoters? Does that money need to be raised by FIA and FIM? So those are some questions that need to be answered by not by the fans but by the people organizing these races, I feel. And there is not much that we can do here, but definitely the drivers and the teams can push for higher safety standards at all these races.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it would be a shame to see Spa leave the Formula One calendar, right? If
Absolutely.
they can't meet the safety standards, and if the safety standards are revisited as such. But I think there is enough space to reconstruct that corner. And obviously, the biggest problem is the money and the finances. So yeah, as you said, steps need to be taken. And if Motorsport as a community wants to visit Spa every year, and multiple different categories, I think it should be a collective effort, because once Motorsport stops visiting Spa, they won't be able to generate revenue, and then they won't be able to change the track. So it would be a downhill spiral from that.
Absolutely. Now coming on to our next topic of discussion. Once again, FIA. So a lot of confusion over the weekend regarding the race. A lot of different rules, interpretations, and whatnot. And I think a lot of people have come out and said that these rules are written in legalese fashion, or they're really vague. They don't explicitly state what is to be done and what is not to be done, and it is up to the interpretation. And it was surprising to see that even all the teams had different interpretations of the rules, and they were all operating on different assumptions and things like that, which was really chaotic as fans sitting back home. But obviously, disaster for FIA. There is a requirement for, I won't say rewriting the rules, but some sort of issuing some sort of directives, or clarifying rules, or how especially in these situations, if they were to, because obviously you can't preempt or think about and address all situations that may occur. You just can't do that in the rules. So but I guess the least they could do is at least clarify how the rules how the rules will be applied in the future if we were to have a similar situation as we did this past weekend. So that is like the minimum that we as fans are looking for. And I think one of the things that was two of the things, I guess, that were debated across the weekend was one was Perez's re-entry into the GP after Red Bull said they won't be they'll be withdrawing the entry, and the second issue was the lap count and how many laps were counted, was especially with the first time when they went around twice. They did the formation lap and they did an extra lap. but there's confusion regarding whether or not that one extra lap counted as a race lap or not. So, what about your thoughts? What was your interpretation of the rules, Vedant, this weekend?
I mean, see, it's quite very confusing. If if there's a safety car restart in if there's a safety car start in normal rainy conditions, then you'll have a formation lap, you'll have a safety car lap, a couple of safety car laps, and then you'll have the race. So in that scenario, the safety car laps after the formation laps do get counted into the race count, right? And even after the red flag, when the cars go around to the grid, that lap gets counted. So I mean, obviously it's strange. It was very confusing. As you said, nobody knew what was going on, and yeah, it is high time to revisit the rules as such. So what I think can be a solution, it's not sure, but the half points regulation is only for 75% of the race, right? If we complete 76% of the race, we get full points. We can have a similar rule for minimum race laps, I guess, so that they don't have only a two laps behind safety car. So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, definitely. I was gonna come to that later, but since you brought it up, I do agree with you that a minimum 2 laps behind a safety car is kind of weird to award any points, especially since this race was like the shortest race in F1, and it was shorter than the sprint race where we just award a maximum of 3 points
3 points,
for the
yeah.
winner. So it's definitely absurd for Max Verstappen to walk away with 12 and a half points at the end of the weekend. But at the same time, what was I gonna say? Yeah, I was gonna backtrack. So whatever happened, like the way the FIA handled the situation, at least regarding the laps that were counted, uh, once the weekend was over, I was able to go back and look at it and clarify it for myself, and it does make sense because uh, when they went out behind the safety car the first time, it said the race start was aborted, right? The race procedure was suspended, which meant they did do the formation lap, but the race never started because after the formation lap, even if you're behind the safety car and the race starts, you usually have green lights at the start finish straight.
Yeah.
But you didn't have green lights. You had flashing reds, which means the race start was aborted. So obviously that lap didn't count, and when they went out again, the lap counted straight away. Once they crossed the start finish line and went out, that was lap one, and they went out a second time, and in total they completed 3 laps. So that was understandable. So that was some clarification, I guess. And if the fans go back and look at what exactly happened, there are multiple people who have written down the explanations. I think the race did an article. I think the race fans did an article, and so on and so forth. So that was understandable. Regarding Perez, that was a little weird because obviously the race start was aborted, but you did do the formation lap, so Perez was allowed in the pits. But I think there was confusion regarding the fact that Red Bull withdrew their entry, and how were they allowed to re-enter the competition with Perez's car. So that's a little bit iffy for me, and especially the fact that if the race start, even though the race start was aborted, the cars did go around a second time, and then they were in the pit lane. So does Sergio Perez, because he didn't do the start procedure, was suspended, but since he didn't do the formation lap, he would start in the pit lane, which was done. But again, the lap count thing was kind of confusing because I think Martin Brundle and Paul di Resta were talking about the fact, and Dave Crofty were talking about the fact that he should have been like 1 lap down at first, and then like 5 laps down and whatnot. So that was also really confusing. Obviously, at the end of the weekend, it didn't matter. But again, that is something that the FIA should clarify, not just for the teams but also for the fans.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. See, I hope FIA and the F1 management take a lot of lessons from Spa, because I have never seen this level of confusion at a Formula One race. Right? There have been confusion regarding red flags, restarts, and all these stuff, but the amount of confusion and amount of gray area that we encountered in Spa was ridiculous. We
And
don't.
as far as the points are concerned, if you're just going behind the safety car, that should not count as a race, in my opinion. And
Yeah,
I think it is high
absolutely.
time that FIA went back and figured out what would count as a race if you have absolutely no racing laps at all. Because we didn't even have like one green flag lap, so we never went racing. So I think obviously, like you said, the requirement needs to be changed to like 25% or something to get half points. But I think there should be a clause in there that states that there have to be green flag laps within that 25% or 30% or whatever that is.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, these are, I think these rules are way older, and the level of safety requirements in this era is unprecedented. So I think obviously the half, like the minimum, the 50% points rule and all these rules are because of safety in cases that the full race cannot be completed, right? In due to rain or everything such that. So I think,
Yeah, and all.
yeah, things need to be taken care of, and I mean changes need to be made. That's all. Yeah.
Yeah, when all the drivers did come out and share the same sentiment that there was absolutely no point in giving out points
Yeah.
this weekend when there was absolutely no race. And but although the only positive that we all took I think there were two positives to take away from this weekend from a fan's perspective. George Russell got his first podium in a Williams,
Yeah.
the first podium after Lance Stroll in 2017 Baku, I think. So that is something to celebrate, regardless of how it came. Definitely great qualifying performance from George Russell. That we'll come to in a bit. And the fact that the championship is closer once again. Only 3 points separate Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton after this weekend. So not all bad. Not all bad from a fan's perspective when you look at the bigger picture. Coming to the next question, Vedant, we have: should the fans at Spa be refunded for a miserable Sunday? Now,
Ab-
obviously, Lewis Hamilton came out and said, the two laps were just for commercial reasons, and everybody got their money, the promoters got their money, the sponsors got their money, and the fans should be refunded so that they can have their money too. What are your thoughts?
I mean, yes, they should be refunded. I'm not sure if they got refunded in US 2005 or not, but I think at least, yeah, they should be refunded because they did not see any racing, and there are arguments that your ticket does include the Formula 3 race as well. But I saw on Twitter and on Reddit and everywhere that due to issues regarding parking and the traffic jams around the circuit due to the weather, people could not even watch the Formula 3 race as well. So yes, yes, they should be refunded. And I mean, yeah, I don't know if it was solely for commercial reasons or not. And obviously, Stefano Domenicali has come out and defended the decision that it was not for commercial reasons. But
Yeah,
I,
but whatever has come from the F1 side, from Stefano's side, like Stefano also came out and said that they will consider the fans and do whatever is best for them too. But there's just not been enough of, I guess, a concrete argument or a concrete statement from him that shows that F1 will be addressing this issue in the immediate future.
yeah, absolutely. And I mean, see, this is unprecedented. This entire weekend was unprecedented, but at least the Sunday was. And I don't know, they can't look back at past events and all these stuff. So I don't know. They should.
Now, obviously, it doesn't have to be absolutely refunded. There could be other solutions, such as offering massive discounts to next year tickets or something like that. Just
Yeah,
giving the money back is not the only solution, but it'll be nice to see if they do something. Obviously, there is an argument for not refunding all tickets because some people might have bought like the 3-day package or whatever, and they did get Friday, Saturday, and if they came on Sunday, they might have caught the Formula 3 race, maybe not. But I don't think there is an argument for not refunding. Obviously, you don't know what's gonna happen. Everybody's trying to do the best they can, and even it's not like the F1 promoters knew that the race wouldn't happen, and then they still charge people for tickets. But in good faith, obviously, there is not an argument for people who just bought tickets for Sunday to not be refunded. While there might be somewhat an argument for people who bought a package or whatever, to be content with whatever little racing they got over the 3 days.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, it can be considered. And obviously, refunding the entire ticket sales would be a ridiculous loss to the circuit itself, because I don't think Formula One is going to refund them. The circuit will have to refund them because the circuit earns from those
Yep.
tickets, right? So yeah, and obviously the circuit of Spa is going through a tough time. They had
I
the
mean,
the floods in a few months back, and obviously I think the CEO or someone got murdered, and now this. So it's been and obviously the 24 hour of Spa crash as well. But yeah,
it's been, yeah, it's definitely been a trying time for the Spa-Francorchamps owners and whoever runs the place. But it's been like an economically stressful time for literally everyone involved in motorsport. So you can't blame people if it's hard to refund money back. But obviously, we feel for the fans, even though we weren't there. If we had been there, we would have been really, really miserable too, and we would have been upset, and we would have wanted our money back. Nothing to take away from that. Now let's come back to some more, F1, I guess, driver and team talk. The question that I have for you, Vedant, is why are Mercedes waiting to announce next year's driver lineup? Toto Wolff has come up and said multiple times now that they have already agreed on it, especially after George's P2 performance in qualifying. He said, okay, we know George is great, and this performance just tells us that he's on the right track and he's doing what we expect from him, and that will not change our decision to sign George or not, since we have already made that decision. So, what do you think is the reason that Mercedes are waiting to announce next year's driver lineup?
well, here's a conspiracy. I think it's Valtteri Bottas, and they are just waiting for a good weekend to announce him. I mean, when his performance is good.
Uh, I don't know if I agree with that. I was thinking it was more something like they're just waiting to, like, for Valtteri to make some concrete future plans,
Yeah,
so that when the announcement is made, Valtteri can talk about his future plans. So they're giving Valtteri time to get his future together. But I guess both of us agree on the fact that George Russell will be moving to Mercedes in 2022. Taking from our responses to this particular question. And it'll be really surprising if he doesn't. Obviously, F1 also did release a new calendar. There's some minor changes. We do have this triple header like it was supposed to be. So we'll be going to Zandvoort next weekend, and we'll be going to Monza the weekend after. I think the Russian Grand Prix and the Turkish Grand Prix have been preponed by a week. So we'll be going to the Russian Grand Prix in Sochi this year on September 24th, and will be in Turkey on October 8th. And then the United States Grand Prix is still scheduled for the same weekend, which is October 22nd. And then we have a week's break, and then we go to Mexico. And then we go to Sao Paulo right after that, and then that's basically a triple header from Mexico, Sao Paulo, and then it is still to be announced what was going to be that, but it's looking like it'll be Qatar on November 19th, and then we have, I think, another week's break, and then we go to Saudi Arabia, and then we go to
UAE.
the dates are wrong on the website, but yeah, I think then we go to UAE for the season finale. So not a lot of changes, but we only have 22 races this season, not 23. I think at the beginning of the season, when we did our preseason review or whatever, we did say that it'll be difficult for F1 to conduct all 23 races, and I think the number we agreed on was like 20 races would be possible by the end of the year, 21, something like that.
Yeah,
So I guess we are definitely moving towards that direction. But a lot, if we end up going to Qatar, there'll be quite a few new tracks for F1 this year. Zandvoort, we're going to Jeddah, Qatar. We were supposed to go to Vietnam last year, didn't happen. And then yeah, so we'll be going to Gora Drive next year. Australia has
and
some changes.
yeah,
Abu Dhabi has some changes.
we
So
had
a lot to look forward
we
to.
had Portimao as well last year. A new
Exactly, and then we went to Portimao again this year. So we've been visiting a lot of new places with F1. But yeah, now let's come back to the highlight of the weekend, George Russell's P2. How do you even, how do you compare that performance with that? Wet conditions, so they were not dry conditions. And he didn't just beat the Mercs. He beat everyone else that Williams is not on pace with. He's been beating Ferrari. He beat AlphaTauri. He beat Pierre Gasly in the AlphaTauri. He beat Sebastian Vettel in the Aston Martin. He beat Sergio Perez in the Red Bull, and he beat Lewis Hamilton in the Mercedes. How do you even analyze his performance in the wet? Now, obviously, he is a great driver in the wet. We know that from his junior career, but like it's just so hard. If I had to grade this performance, it'd be just so hard for me to even comprehend how good this performance is compared to any other weekend.
Yeah, I mean, comparing it to any other driver or any other weekend of George himself would be a waste of time because we can't do that. We absolutely can't. And I mean, it was, we know that the Williams is not capable of this pace. Obviously, George has been putting Williams in
See, you
Q.
make that argument that Williams is not capable of that pace, but so far, we've seen George make it into Q3,
Yeah, I mean, I was.
P7, P8. Let me
Yeah,
finish this argument because I knew you were gonna say that, so which is why I really thought about this before we sat down to talk. So George has been qualifying P7, P8, P9 on a dry weekend when Nicholas Latifi has been qualifying let's say P17, P18, ahead of the two Haas's and maybe ahead of one of the Alfa Romeos. But this weekend, not only did George qualify P2, Nicholas Latifi split the two Ferraris and qualified P12. So
Yeah.
the Williams had greater pace in the wet. We didn't really see the Williams in the dry. Per se, it was like mixed conditions the entire weekend. So Williams did have greater pace in the weekend. So have Williams brought upgrades to this, after the summer break? Have they done something, and do they have greater pace than we anticipate? And if George Russell, I guess this is the question for later, but if George Russell does have this pace even in the dry, let's say not P2, but let's say more like an AlphaTauri pace or like an Aston Martin pace, can he pull off genuine points at Zandvoort, which is supposed to be a non-overtaking race?
Yeah, it's an interesting, thought. See, Williams at the start of the season they said that their car was, specific to few races. They didn't specify what races, and basically the characteristics of the car were exceptional for few circuits and few situations, and too bad for others. So maybe Spa was one of them regarding both the drivers'
I
performances.
mean,
But at the end of
they
the
did
day,
do well.
when the conditions are like this, it's more about the car, more about the driver than the car, I believe. And I think Russell just showed that. And regarding Nicholas Latifi, I think that was a happy surprise.
Yeah, definitely. I totally agree that George Russell has been outperforming that car. And I guess, the point that you make that the Williams car is suited to some tracks and it's not suited to some other tracks, which I kind of makes sense that it would be more suited to a track like Spa, because we saw that the Williams did well in Austria, which is, I wouldn't say like a high speed circuit, but it has flowing corners, medium speed corners, and a lot of straights. And they did kind of well there. And I think Silverstone, they had a decent performance too. Not that great in qualifying,
No,
but
George Russell got into Q3 at Silverstone, right?
exactly. So yeah, I guess I was confusing it with Hungary. Sorry. But yeah, they did well enough even in Silverstone to be there, just be there to grab maybe 1 point or 2 points, which they were denied in the end. So I guess that makes sense. The next race is Zandvoort. We don't know how the cars will react there. So definitely, something to look forward to. But again, something to celebrate. George Russell walks home with a trophy. He can put a check mark in his box. Points for Williams, podium for Williams, and that's a lot of reason to celebrate. Now, the other driver that I want to talk about was Landon Norris. He had P1 pace out and out. If you're gonna tell me that Max would have been P1, even if Lando had not crashed out, I'm not gonna agree with you at all.
Absolutely.
Lando was definitely the class of the field in Q1 and in Q2. My question is, can we expect a Landon Norris pole and maybe even a win at Monza? We know that McLaren loves a straight line. It's really quick in medium speed corners. Can we expect Landon Norris to outdrive that McLaren and finish ahead of at least both the Mercedes.
That's interesting. And now that I think about it, I want that to happen. But I mean, I think Monza, while similar to Spa, the middle section, the middle sector at Spa is a lot more flowing than we have anything at Monza, right? So I think that might bring out, weaknesses in some cars and differences in some cars. But obviously, the McLaren is faster than the Mercedes in a straight line, which we saw not just at Spa, but at other circuits for this season, right? So yeah, it's going to be interesting. It's going to be very interesting, and land with the form Landon Norris is showing, it won't be a surprise if he gets a pole.
Absolutely, and a happy weekend for his teammate Daniel Ricciardo, qualified P4. Definitely off the pace from Lando Norris, still about a second behind in the wet compared to what Lando was doing. But overall, I think he'll be happy to have a strong qualifying, let's say, after the summer break, and will give him some confidence going into Zandvoort, to do better. Sergio Perez and Fernando Alonso signed their contract extensions this weekend. It looked pretty obvious. I didn't even know that Alonso didn't have a contract for next year. I had assumed that Alonso did have a contract until the end of 2022.
Yeah.
So it took me by surprise when that news came. I was like, what are they talking about? I thought he had a 2-year contract, but apparently not. And I think I texted you before the weekend that, hey, Perez and Alonso have signed their contracts this weekend. They're not going to have a good race. And Perez ended up winning his car before the race started, and Alonso did not have a race and did not score any points. Unlike the other top 10 drivers, had a terrible qualifying, qualified behind his teammate.
Yeah.
So, the trend continues. If you sign your contract, you don't do well. And I think the best finish we have had from someone who extended his contract was Lewis Hamilton. I think he finished P4 after a terrible race for a Mercedes. I think in Austria he finished behind Lando Norris and Valtteri Bottas, and Max Verstappen won that race. So, yeah, the trend continues. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
What else do we have from this weekend? We already talked about how the lead is down to 3 points. How Williams came away with more constructor points this weekend than Mercedes did. Great news for Williams. But obviously, yeah, one stat you did put in there was that Red Bull have now 12 wins in 50 races with Honda. It was Honda's 50th race. It was, I think, Landon Norris's 50th race.
Yeah, and George Russell's
50th race.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So a lot of 50s this weekend. And Red Bull had 12 wins in 100 hybrid races with Renault, which is twice the number of races and the same number of wins. So definitely this has definitely been a successful partnership for Red Bull, out and out. I think that's all from my side, Vedant. I don't think there's anything else that I want to discuss. Any thoughts? Any last thoughts from you?
I think the one thing that, a positive as such from this weekend is that neither Bottas nor Perez scored any points after Lando Norris's crash. So basically, the fight for P3 remains the same after Silverstone, because even in Hungary they didn't score any points. So Lando Norris now has even less races to defend his P3 in the championship. So that, and with Monza coming up, as we discussed, it's going to be super exciting. And obviously, we know Bottas and Perez are not performing up to the level that their cars warrant, right? That is one thing. And another thing, luckily for Bottas and Stroll and Lando, the grid penalties are served. That Bottas and Stroll earned in Hungary, and Lando Norris earned this weekend because of the gearbox change. So yeah, I think that's all from my side as well. Yeah, before I forget, I absolutely love Fernando Alonso's driver's view cam. We only see that in Formula E, but seeing that in F1 at Spa, going up to Rouge, it was incredible. Yeah.
That was definitely breathtaking when I saw it too, and they kept replaying it over the course of the weekend,
Yeah,
and that was just phenomenal. And not just that, a lot of meme-worthy moments coming out of this weekend. Pictures of Landon Norris sleeping, Carlos Sainz sleeping, and just like a lot of lovely moments. The Alpine garage doing, I think, the Macarena or something,
yeah,
and people playing cards, waiting for the race to resume. So
yeah. And
a lot of great
Seb,
moments that were captured.
Seb and Mick played football, like
Yeah,
keepy ups or something. And then we have a clip of Seb and Michael playing the same thing. So
yeah,
that was
yeah.
quite beautiful.
And obviously, this was the 30th. This weekend was 30 years from when Michael Schumacher made his debut at Spa in that Jordan car,
Yeah,
I believe. So yeah, that was great. And I think Sky Sports also did a feature with I think Karan Chandok and Mick Schumacher. They played that feature during the race when we were all waiting. When Mick Schumacher took the wheels of the Jordan car that his dad first drove 30 years ago. So yeah, like I said, a lot of moments, a lot of heartfelt moments coming out of this weekend, and especially with Seb checking up on Lando after his crash was also something that will be remembered in the future. Seb is just, I think Seb has just been the best role model for literally everyone, not just in the paddock, but all the fans out there too. I feel, and I don't know, he deserves some sort of award. I don't know what, like a humanity award or
yeah.
something. I feel,
I was going to
but
say that,
something,
yeah. I mean,
yeah,
we'll have some sort of driver of the year at the end of the season. Every website will have their own driver of the year. But I think the man of the year or the human of the year as such will be Seb Vettel.
absolutely. It's just lovely to see him, not just not just like get along with everyone and do all the right things, but also enjoy himself in that Aston Martin car just as much. Obviously, people did after the Saturday incident, people did call for Seb to become, to take up Michael Massey's job after he hung up his helmet.
Yeah.
So we'll see if Seb takes his fans up on that offer. But yeah, that's all from our side. It's been a long podcast, I feel, but it was great having you, Vedan, today, and lovely talking to you once again. And I'll catch you again next week after the race in Zandvoort. So, see you soon.